Thank you all for joining us for our third and final roundtable of the season. At this time, I'd like to welcome everyone tuned in via stream on the Chicago Fire Facebook and Twitter pages. For participating media here in the room, please stick to one question before we move to our next journalist. We'll start with a loop around the room before circling back with the group. We ask that you please speak into the microphone for each question. Media on the call, we will work our way around the room before moving to the phone lines. And with that, I'll turn things over to Chicago Fire President, General Manager Nelson Rodríguez for an opening statement.
Thank you, Jamie. Thanks, everybody, for participating today in the room, online, or over the phone. If you'll allow me, I just want to begin with a few comments. First, on behalf of our club, I wish to extend sincere condolences to Fred Hubner on the passing of his wife, Pat. I had the good fortune of meeting Pat on a few occasions. She had an ease and a grace about her that was truly warming. So I ask that everyone please include Fred in their thoughts tonight. Second, I want to issue congratulations to the National Soccer Hall of Fame inductees and recipients, the Colin Jose Media Award, which went to Tony Quinn, and the inductees this year, Abby Wambach and Sunil Gulati. To Sunil in particular, who was always very good to me in my career and very generous, a transformational gentleman who helped take the sport and the league from something that was seen as just orange slices at halftime to viewing parties of tens of thousands of people. So congratulations, well-deserved, to Abby and Sunil. And my final preamble is to a class of MLS veterans who announced their retirement this year. If I missed anybody or anyone retired subsequently, I apologize, but offer equal thanks to Tony Beltran, Chad Marshall, Michael Parkhurst, Nick Raimondo, Tim Howard, and of course the two of our own, DeMarcus Beasley and Bastian Schweinsteiger. While your play was exquisite, your character is what really helped make this league better. Best of luck to you in your next future endeavors. Last Tuesday was a very special day for the Fire family. It was a perfect setting with past and present players, loyal supporters, great fans, dedicated partners. The mayor was present, all in celebration of our return to Soldier Field. When I reflected on that moment, it emphasized to me that all of us have a stake in the future and in the success of this club. And what I most took was the excitement, the palpable feeling that Chicagoans are ready to embrace this club unconditionally and to showcase its spirit and our city to the rest of MLS and to the greater football world. That feeling, that energy, that faith, that optimism is what makes missing the playoffs this year that much more painful. It was there for us. We had all that we needed, and we didn't deliver. Now, I took the past week to collect my notes, to seek counsel and opinions of people that I trust, to elicit different perspectives, and to arrange my thinking. Why? Why didn't we make the playoffs? I have to be honest in that some of those lines remain blurred to me, but some are also very clear. In my analysis, our football did not let us down. We can, and most times, play with anyone on equal footing, home or away. I think our talent level was enough. 10 former or present national team players, good depth, we had experience. I could recite all the statistics and chalk it up to bad luck, but I believe luck is a residue of design, and so if it didn't go our way, we had something to do with that as well. So, I'm left with the conclusion that something in our environment needs to improve. Something in our environment just isn't right. Now, environment, at least to my perspective, is very complex. It involves people, it involves norms and customs, expectations, there's the physical environment. And everybody who touches the environment plays a part in it. And what I've done is first look at myself. What did I do that contributed to that environment, or what did I fail to do that contributed to that environment? And as I was trying to put my finger on it, I thought back to an article earlier in the year that was written about Jeremiah Guchar, where he spoke to the reason why he wears 33. And he defined his friend as someone who was available. And I realized that I wasn't available enough. And I needed to be. And I could have helped the situation more. So to remedy that, we've initiated a search to add an experienced individual to our staff whose focus will be the first team coaches, and the build out of our support staff. I'm confident we'll find the right person, and that person will provide us some much needed support. To me, it's another logical step in our evolution as a club, and it's in line with the strategic plan that we presented to ownership back in March and that they approved. You know, that plan was influenced heavily by Daniel Burnham's quote, "Make no little plans, for they have no magic to stir men's blood. Make big plans, aim high in hope and work." And as all of you did last Thursday, you know, I want to thank each of you in the room and on the line again today for helping to share our story and how it unfolds as we move forward. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Start with Dan Santaramita.
Hi, Nelson. You talked about your role in shaping the team's environment. How does Panovich play into that, and how did you assess him in that regard?
As I mentioned, Dan, I think everyone does. So I always think it's right and appropriate to start with myself and to recognize those areas in which I need to improve and get better. In terms of Pano, it's the same with players. You know, everybody contributes in some way. I think by and large our players were put in a position to succeed, but we didn't. And I think it's also would be unfair and unjust to just say that the players failed in that moment. I think that's incomplete. And so I think we have to look at, you know, it's something more than team spirit. You know, there's Finland was invaded by Russia. And Russia came over the lines with 450,000 troops. I think they had like 6,000 tanks and over 400 aircraft. And the Finnish had, I think, an army of 70,000. They had 32 tanks and about 100 or 100 and change planes. But the Finnish have this sense, this spirit, and if I mispronounce it, I apologize, I'm not Finnish, but it's Sisu, S-I-S-U. And it's about perseverance, even in extreme odds. It's about continuing to move forward, even if you have failed. And I just think that in critical moments, in both boxes, the opponents and our own, we seem to let down. And so I think that's a shared responsibility. I don't think it's about assigning blame, and I think we have to find a shared solution to improve that, to move forward.
Rodrigo?
Hey Nelson, how are you? Would you mind answering in English and Spanish?
Sure, I'll do my best.
Well, being here in Chicago, one of the top 3 markets in the country, how do you explain, or what can you say about the attendance last year or this season, and what do you guys know about that, and what are your plans for next year? This is about, I don't know, signing a big name, a big star, It's about doing something different. What are
Sure.
what's your ideas?
So, primero en español. La asistencia obviamente no fue buena este año, pero esa asistencia se debe a muchos años, no solamente este año. Y tenemos que mejorar en eso. Y hablaste o preguntaste sobre los planes para el año que viene. Hay mucho que tiene que cambiar. Una de esas es la experiencia que nosotros podemos dar a la afición dentro del estadio, llegando al estadio. Y por tiempos estuvimos tratando de mejorar en eso, en los medios sociales, en las redes sociales. Estamos mostrando un crecimiento importante sobre eso. Pero toda la experiencia tiene que mejorar. Y sin duda siempre se lleva si el equipo gana o no gana. Sobre si es simplemente traer un jugador de renombre, no pienso que es tan simple. También no pienso que la gente se va a dejar engañar por un nombre. Tenés que tener un equipo que muestra el espíritu de la ciudad, que juega con ganas, que va y busca ganar fuera de casa y en casa, y que cumple con esos métodos y que cumple con ganar. Entonces pienso que la afición refleja que el club pasó por un mal momento. Yo creo y pienso que estamos en un muy buen momento y estamos a punto de mejorar en todos aspectos. Not a literal, but a pretty close translation. You know, obviously attendance was poor this year. I think that's a result of the last several years of being a struggle, principally that the team hasn't won. In terms of plans for 2020 to improve it, we look at the entire fan experience that has to improve and change, and it will. We're developing different fan experiences. You know, our ticket offerings will be different. We'll have season tickets that are priced as low as $15 a game. We'll have a variety of plans for fans so that they can find something that is flexible. But it also always comes back to the performance of the team. With regard to signing a big name player, we won't look to sign a big name player just for the name. I don't think you can fool fans. I don't think you can pander to fans. I think it's about the overall product, trying to build a winning team and a team that plays in a way that reflects the city and its citizens, and a team that tries to win home and away each time out. I hope I did a good job there.
Let's go to Jeremy McCullough.
Nelson, can you talk about the future of a couple of players with club options this season, including Nico Gaitan, and if he'll be converted to a DP?
Sure. First thing, Jeremy, that'll give me an opportunity to break a little bit of news. First, we won't make all of our decisions at the same time. I think we have a lot of players in interesting situations, and so we'll make decisions to exercise options on a case-by-case basis. Earlier today, we did exercise 3 options: Fabian Herbers, Jeremiah Guchar, and Michael Azira. All 3 wanted to return, were excited to return. All 3 were newcomers. I think they assimilated very well into our club and into our team, and provided great spirit, and they're great character in the locker room as well. Specifically with Nico Gaitan, I'm actually meeting with his agent tomorrow here in the city, and we'll have a discussion. For me, part of the conversation always centers around, does the player want to be here? Because it doesn't help us to have players who may not want to be here. So I'll speak to his agent. My end of season interview with Nico is also this week, so I'll speak to him directly, and we'll start to get a sense of that at that time. I think there was another player you asked about, Jeremy?
Is Dax up on the club options?
He is as well, and I'll meet with Dax later this week to speak to him and see how he's feeling. You know, there's, I think, veteran players who have given so much, not just to the club, but to the league. I like to afford them some latitude and see how they're feeling. You know, a few years back, Patrick Niarco had expressed a desire to leave, and we accommodated him in a way that he wanted, even though we had hoped to keep him. So I'll talk to Dax this week, and at some point I'm sure I'll speak to his representation as well.
Nelson, know another player in a similar situation is Alexander Katai. When you're looking at the DP situation, obviously now 2 of the 3 with Bassey and Nikolic have moved on from the club. What's your approach when you look at the transfer market and how you're looking to fill those spots? And then, as you commented about Nico and Dax, is there any plan or discussion timeline for deciding on Katai's future with the club?
I'll take the second part first, if that's okay, Alex.
Yep.
So Katai's agent's coming to Chicago, and I'm meeting with him towards the latter part of the week. I'm not sure if it'll be Thursday or Friday, but one of those 2 days. Alex's contract is different. If his option were to be exercised, he could be a TAM player because the transfer fee was paid previously. So that puts him a little bit in a different situation. We'll speak to Alex. There were clubs around the world at the close of the second window who had inquired about him. There are some MLS clubs that have inquired about his services. So we'll see where that goes with him. On DPs overall, I said a few years ago, and my philosophy really hasn't changed much. I think DPs need to finish the puzzle. I think you need to make sure that the scaffolding is strong enough to support DPs. I actually feel good about our scaffolding. I think that with guys like Calvo and Kappelhoff and Bornstein and Frankowski, we've got good pieces with guys like Bronico and Sapong, whether they're starters or not. We can rely on them. Herbers has evolved and developed. So in an ideal world, we'd look to add a few more pieces before going the DP route, but we have to be nimble to respond to the market. We have some targets in mind, and if the market dictates that we have to move on a particular target, even if the timing is imperfect, we'll be prepared to do so.
Guillermo Rivera.
Nelson, in your opening, you mentioned that you were looking to add to the technical staff, I guess, to look at someone in support of the first team. Is that sort of a technical director position? Have you kind of defined what that position would entail? Is it different from the the search for a chief culture officer?
It's different than the chief culture officer, for sure. I'm not sure if this is a technical director or sporting director, the general manager. I think the qualities of the individual will dictate that. This person, though, will have as a primary and at least initially as a solitary focus the first team. I think that's where our focus needs to be on improving. Our academy continues to thrive and do really well. At halftime, our 17s were up, and they had won their first 2 DA games, or Generation Adidas tournament games this weekend, and our U15s went 2-1 in the 3 games so far. We've had 27 players over the last 3 years be invited to youth national team camps. 27 different players. That's a quarter of our academy. So they're doing pretty well. Our Fire Juniors is doing pretty well. So I want the focus to be on the first team, and we'll look to find someone who can help us in that regard.
Rusty?
Nelson, this past year there were some changes in goalkeeping. Went from Mosted, went to Kronholm. What are we looking for in 2020? A quality goalkeeper? Or are we going to stay with what we have for the coming next year?
Well, we have Kenneth Kronholm is on his contract for next year, and we see him as a number 1. Like most players, the adjustment was challenging, even for him. From August 1st to the end of the year, by the metrics that we use, and then through an outside group that we hired to analyze the performance of all of our players in our team, Kronholm was a top 5 goalkeeper from August 1st to the end of the year. He's clearly much more comfortable. I think, understands the league, understands the team, now. He's a great guy, super positive energy at all times. So we see him remaining as the number one goalkeeper. We have options on Richard and on David and on Stephen Cleveland, who completed a successful season at Lansing, and we'll evaluate all three of those guys and make a determination in the coming weeks.
Warren?
Nelson, it's our understanding that Ken Lala was brought in as a consultant to the technical staff. Is he still with the club? And if so, how does what he was doing compare with the support position that you were talking about?
First, Ken was not here as a consultant to the technical staff. Ken was here at my request, and also in part as he is a candidate for a position that had been internally labeled as a chief culture officer. I've known Ken for a long time, hold him in high regard. I took the opportunity while Ken was here to have him share some observations with me, and he, in part of trying to learn for himself, exchanged ideas with the staff. I don't believe that Ken would be interested. I don't know. I hadn't thought about Ken in this new position. We're still thinking of him for that other position that would affect not just the first team staff, but the entire front office and every staff member in the front office. We have another candidate for that position coming in at the end of the month. So that search continues. But my general thinking is whether this is a technical director or some form, I hadn't thought about Ken. I don't know about his interest. We'll see if he's interested, and we'll see what candidates come forward.
Jorge?
Hola Nelson, ya hablaste mucho de la baja asistencia, de que el equipo necesita resultados, de qué figura o no contratar en el equipo. En específico, ¿cuál va a ser la estrategia para que ustedes atraigan a la afición latina al Soldier Field? Si un estadio de 20,000 plazas no lo llenaban, ¿cómo van a esperar llenar uno de 60,000 en general? Y el papel, si es crucial para ustedes, esa asistencia de la comunidad latina.
Sí, mira, primeramente tenemos que mejorar nuestros esfuerzos dentro de la comunidad hispana. Aunque hacemos muchas cosas con nuestra fundación y el programa Plays y todo, pienso que en los últimos años no hablamos directamente con el afición hispano y tenemos que mejorar en eso. También por esa razón traemos a gente, mira, recién en el grupo de Sean trajimos a Elizabeth Sánchez, que era de US Soccer, que no solamente habla, sino conoce ese mercado y lo conoce dentro de Chicago. En nuestro grupo que hacen todas las promociones creativos, estamos trayendo a una señorita también, que es mexicana, que trabajó con la Federación Mexicana de Fútbol para ayudarnos en ese aspecto. Y también tenemos que tener un producto que habla de fútbol, más fútbol que de soccer, y ahí tenemos que mejorar. Sobre la pregunta de un estadio de 20, un estadio de 60, no es más la localidad de ese estadio. Nosotros pensamos que ser central va a ser mejor para más gente. Obviamente es un más largo distancia para la gente que vive en los suburbios y tenemos que encontrar maneras de ayudarle a ellos, pero en general pensamos que somos más accesible para más gente y más gente de fútbol y de deportes si estamos en Soldier Field. Do I translate? Okay. So the question was, you've spoken about attendance. You haven't filled a stadium with 20,000. How do you intend to fill a stadium of 62? And in general, how are you going to try to appeal and attract the Hispanic audience more often? I commented that on the Hispanic audience, we need to do a better job of speaking to them directly, and we need to do a better job of being in their communities more frequently. While we do a lot of great things in our community and Our foundation does great work, and our plays program does great work. There's no substitute for being in the community more often and to speaking with the Hispanic population and all of our populations more directly. To that end, in Sean Dennison's communications group, we hired Elizabeth Sanchez, who was formerly with U.S. Soccer, who understands that audience very well, is well connected in the Chicago market in that audience. We've hired another young lady in our graphic design and creative group who previously worked with the Mexican Federation and Mexican football, who is bicultural and bilingual. So we're making direct efforts to appeal to that audience in their way, in their language. And another part of that is being more football than soccer. And we think that being at Soldier Field isn't a case of looking at 60,000 versus 20. It's about accessibility and being central and being more available to more of the public. For sure, we recognize that that creates inconveniences or greater distances for the suburban market, and we'll have to win them over with our fan experience and with our product to make up for the extra journey. But we think being in Soldier Field will help. One thing I didn't mention in Spanish, which I will and I'll mention now, while our goal is to fill the stadium for the first game, in general, we're looking at a configuration of about 28,000, which is the 100 and 200 levels. Great sight lines and all of that. And much like Seattle did and much like Atlanta has done, we'll use an accordion to enlarge capacity as needed or when called upon or when it makes sense. So la capacidad para el estadio para el primer partido todavía tenemos la meta y el gol de llenarlo todo, pero en general vamos a tener una configuración del estadio en 28,000 personas y eso se agranda si es necesario en base de lo que quiere la gente. Gracias a ti.
Chris Hartwig.
Following up, actually, off of that question is, how is we've heard about rebranding or rebadging or renaming or some variation of those. Can you give us any more info on where that stands, when it's coming?
Yeah, I think we're pretty much done with that. And we're just adding one or two final details. We will share that with Joe. We hope to share it publicly in the next month. We received great input and feedback from fans, from supporters, from partners. Joe has been involved. Andrew was previously involved. We're excited by it. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to show it in about a month's time.
Let's go to Brian
You are
Sandilow on the
unmuted.
conference line. Brian, do you have a question for Nelson?
Yes. Hi. Thank you for making the time for me, Nelson. This is obviously a huge off-season and season for you and the club and everything. What gives you confidence that you and Pano are the right guys to lead this franchise through this off-season and into this 2020 season?
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for your time, and I think a fair question. Look, I understand that there would be skepticism or perhaps even some distrust. You are what your record says you are. When I talk about earlier in my opening, some lines are blurred. There's some combination of data, feel, some combination of third-party opinion, all that goes into the mix. When you lose, it's also natural sometimes to question yourself or your abilities. I think that as I reflect on the 4 years, I think the first year was a reset. It set us up and ended up being, set us up well, and we did well in the second year, finishing third in the table overall. 2018, Brian, I lay at my feet, and I've said that previously. I didn't do a good enough job with the roster. And this year, and we had injuries in 2018 as well. We never made excuses during the course of that year, but they existed. This year was tougher, Brian, because this year it's hard for someone to convince me that we're not good enough. All the underlying metrics should say that we're not just a playoff team, we're probably top 3, or at least top 3 in the conference. Goal differential, which is a standard just around the world. And we have a better goal differential than 4 teams in the playoffs in the East, 4 teams in the playoffs in the West. So it's tough. But one thing is clear, Brian, we cannot continue doing the same things in the same way and expect a different result. And so, I'll be having conversations with Pano this week and the staff. I have some things in mind that need to change and have to change, and we'll get better. And if not, then we'll be changed.
Let's go to Jose Luis on the conference line. Jose Luis, do you have a question for Nelson?
Sí. Hola, Nelson.
Hola, José, ¿qué tal?
Hola, un saludo, Nelson. Primero quería felicitarle por el fichaje de Elizabeth Sánchez. Me parece que es una grandísima incorporación que le puede aportar muchísimo al club.
Gracias.
Y segundo quería preguntarle, mucha gente ahí en el Fire y de la afición habla como el regreso del Soldier Field, que es como marca una nueva era para este Chicago Fire, ¿no? Quería preguntarle si usted también lo ve como una nueva era y cuántas salidas, cuántas llegadas, se va a revolucionar un poco más el equipo para la próxima temporada, ¿no?
¿Cuántos? El último parte de vuelta, José Luis, por favor.
Sí, va a haber una especie de un poco de revolución del equipo, cuántas salidas y llegadas piensa que tiene que tener el equipo para reflotarlo, vamos.
Muy bien. First, I'll translate Jose Luis's. He gave a nice shout out to Elizabeth Sanchez. He said that was a great signing, and we agree with you, Jose Luis, and we're excited to have Elizabeth join our family and our team. He also asked if he thinks that the return to Soldier Field marks a new era, and by way of change to the roster, can we expect a lot of exits and a lot of incorporations? Primero, de parte de Elizabeth, gracias por sus comentarios. Estamos muy contenta que ella va a trabajar con nosotros. Mira, pienso que la etapa de Bridgeview se terminó. Agradecemos al alcalde y toda la gente de Bridgeview por el apoyo que ellos dieron a nosotros durante nuestro tiempo aquí. Pero obviamente tenemos una vista muy positiva, muy optimista en regresar a la ciudad y jugar en el gran estadio de Soldier Field. Sobre las incorporaciones o salidas, es un proceso que vamos a arrancar esta semana, tomando decisiones y viendo qué es posible. Tenemos en mente 4 o 5 jugadores para traer. Ya trajimos a Álvaro Medrán, que para nosotros eso es un gran fichaje, un mediocampista que puede jugar también como extremo o alero o de segundo punta, 25 años de gran jerarquía, y vamos a ir buscando más jugadores de ese perfil si podemos. In terms of incorporations and exits, look, that's what the next few weeks are all about. We're excited by the incorporation of Alvaro Medrán, 25-year-old midfielder who could play as a second forward or winger or any of the midfield positions. He's got great pedigree, and we're excited for him. We have 4 or 5 guys in mind already for various spots, and we'll work on all of those in the coming weeks.
Go back to Dan Santaramita.
Pano, with Schweinsteiger retiring and it says like Nemanja Nikolic is leaving from his announcement, it looks like you're having significant turnover with important players. Is that a challenge to try and replace that much quality in one transfer window?
For starters, the Boston was always on a 1-year kind of basis. And so we always knew we'd think about that at the end of the year. With Nemanja, I always had an arrangement, an agreement with Nemanja that at any time that we received interest in his services or perhaps sought to move his services, that I would let him know. And a couple times during the course of the year, teams inside of MLS and teams outside of MLS expressed interest in Nemanja, and I always shared that with him. And his answer was always the same. He was grateful to have that type of communication, and he said, you have to do what's best for the club, but that he hoped that he could stay. And I'll take this moment just to say that for me, he was a great signing for this club. He's the best teammate I have ever been around. Never missed a session, never missed an opportunity to be uplifting to his teammates, always positive. And even this year, where he was in his rough patch of finishing, he still appreciated his teammates and gave his all. But the idea of the DPs being out of contract or our options, because Basti would have been our option even without an option, Katai is our option, Gaitan is our option, was done by design. Candidly, it was done for two reasons. The first was there's a new CBA coming into place, and we didn't know how that might play out and wanted to give ourselves maximum flexibility against any changes in the CBA. And the other one was, look, frankly, if it didn't go well and we weren't asked back, that the new person who came in would have a good slate, could imprint it in a way that they wanted without the burden of some contracts or some important gaps filled. I was cognizant of that and wanted to make sure that if I didn't have a role going forward, it was in a better place than when we found it, frankly. But important players always need to be replaced. And at some point, Basti was going to move, and at some point, Nico was going to move. And one of the things that's been a benefit is Borja Di Matteis, the agent, and our use of the outside analytics group based out of Europe has really improved our pipeline. So we've been looking at several forwards through the course of the year, having a sense that this was going to be it for our time with Nemanja as a player, because I want the club always to be open to him and to his family. And we know that we needed to add reinforcements in the midfield and in the back line. So whether Basti returned or not, we knew we wanted to add one or two pieces there as well. So I think it all falls into plan a little bit, Dan.
Rodrigo?
Nelson, recuerdo cuando llegaste hablabas que siempre estaba la persona antes del jugador y de su talento. ¿Sigues con esa misma idea? ¿Y cómo hacerle frente a esta ventana de invierno para hacer los fichajes y llenar precisamente los huecos que mencionabas, tanto de Basti como de Nikolic? ¿Están buscando jugadores en Europa? ¿Cuáles son los perfiles y qué posiciones es lo que crees que necesita el Fire para estar compitiendo y llegar a los playoffs el siguiente año?
The question was, Rodrigo mentioned when I first came that I mentioned that we always look at the person ahead of the player. Will that continue? What positions, what profiles, what parts of the world are we looking at to find reinforcements and replace guys like Nikolic and others? Sí, la filosofía que la persona tiene que venir primero sigue. Para mí es fundamental, que eso es muy importante, y una cosa que tengo que reconocer es que este grupo, en mi opinión, no se dio para rendir y siempre dio su máximo, y me parece un crédito al carácter de los muchachos en el vestuario para seguir trabajando para el club y empujando para mejor. En general, nosotros queremos encontrar jugadores más jóvenes, en las edades un poco más ideales, entre 25, 28, 29 años, si es posible. Obviamente siempre hay jugadores que son más mayores, pero todavía tienen gran calidad, como tuvo Basti en sus 3 años. Y en el momento estamos enfocados en Argentina, en Paraguay, en México, en España y Polonia. Digo que los que estamos mirando están más en esos ligas y países, no exclusivamente, pero ahí. Yes, we will continue with the philosophy of first the person and then the player. I think it's fundamental. I think it has served us well. I think even this year, I don't think our team quit. I think our team continued to play hard and give its all for the club and the fans, even in the last game, even going down in the last game. I think we showed that, and I think that serves us well. In general, I think we'd like to find a player profile that skews slightly younger. We'd love to be in those ideal ages, somewhere between 25 to 28 or 29, just like Madron, just like Katai has been the last few years, who's just 28 years old now. Our primary targets at the moment are in Spain, Poland, Argentina, Paraguay, and Mexico. I think that's right. That's not to say exclusively so, but that's where the guys who we are 3 deep in each position, and I would say that's where most of our 1s and 2s are.
Let's go to Jeremy McCullough.
Nelson, you talked about you understanding why people would be skeptical of both you and Paunovic heading into this season. So what would you say to fans? Like, why should they trust you? Or what exactly would inspire confidence in a fan base that's maybe a little sick of losing?
I think on my first press conference ever, I said the same thing. There's nothing I can say, right? There's nothing the person who follows me can say, whether that person comes in tomorrow or a year from tomorrow. The fans have all heard it, and they can see through it. I also think that a lot of fans have seen that we were an exciting team this year. And I think a lot of fans also saw that we were close. Again, I choose oftentimes not to provide spin. But, if we want to talk about metrics, just look at big chances. Second in the league to LAFC, both in those created and those had. Second in the league to LAFC, who's considered one of the most exciting teams in the league. If we finish some percentage of those chances, we're in the playoffs, and we're not having any of these conversations. None of them. Because then we're in the playoffs 2 out of the last 3 years, and who knows what can happen. But we didn't, and so I have to face that music. I think we've shown a capacity to acquire good players. I think we've shown a capacity to attract players who previously did not consider or come to Chicago and now do, whether that's Gaetan or Katai in his prime, or Kappelhoff, who left his country for his first foray overseas to our team, or Frankowski, who's 24 years old, plays for the Polish national team. Congratulations, Frankie, on a fantastic first goal and an important win for Poland. These guys they're choosing the club, is what I hope is how they'd say it. For sure, in part, they're choosing the city. This is a fantastic city to live, work, and play, and it's a great sports town. And I hope I can say with some element of humility that they're choosing us and our values and our vision. But to the fans, all I can promise is to do my absolute best and for you to know that I bleed as you bleed. You deserve more, and we're going to keep working to deliver it.
Alex Campbell.
Nelson, you've talked a lot already about conversations that are going to be upcoming over the next couple weeks, whether that's transfers, players. Since last Tuesday, have you had the chance to speak at length at all with Bastian Schweinsteiger? And has there been any formal thought put together yet on potential options for him to continue to be involved with the club in the future?
No, I didn't. It was after the game Sunday when Basti shared it with the team and the staff. It was very emotional. And I think it speaks to his class and his character that he waited till after the game, that he didn't want the the spotlight taken away from the team. He didn't want the team to feel pressured in any way. He just wanted it to be a normal game. And I just think that that's in keeping with who he is and how he views the reverence and the respect for the game, the locker room, his team, and his teammates in this club. I have spoken to his representative in the past, and we have agreed to speak in the near future about an ongoing role with Basti. I think we both agree that we want it to be significant and not ceremonial, where his football intelligence, his values, and his connections can contribute to the club rather than it be just putting his pretty face as an endorsement. But Basti needed and rightfully is taking some time with his family and his 2 young children, and there's time for that discussion, but it will, I don't know what will come of it yet, Alex. I can say I think there's interest on both parties to continue the relationship in a meaningful way.
Guillermo Rivera?
There were some positions that were sort of up for grabs throughout the course of the year, like everywhere else. Left back was sort of cemented with Bornstein coming on. Relation to Raheem Edwards, he, I believe, didn't make the 18 until after midsummer, and wasn't around very much toward the end. What is the situation with Raheem Edwards?
The situation with Raheem was dealt with privately between Raheem and the club. Both parties wanted it to remain that way. We'll engage with Raheem and his representation now that the season's over again, and we'll see where that nets out.
Rusty?
Nelson, with Bastian and Nikolic leaving us, are we looking for this team to be more of a younger type team as we look forward? And how much is that going to maybe be something that we're looking for, like a building process for the next couple of years?
No, I don't. Look, I think we have a lot of good pieces in place. And I say that also in part by the amount of teams who are looking at our players. So, some teams have not yet been willing to engage, which I respect because they're preparing for the playoffs. But of the teams we've spoken to, which is just less than half, 10 different players have been identified on our team as players of interest to other teams. And that does not include unsigned academy or homegrown players whose rights we have. Otherwise, the number would be greater than 10. In terms of age, I think, look, the trend of the league is that way. But I think I try to look at things through this general lens of a mosaic that's made up of a lot of little tiles. And when you have Andre Reynolds, who's 17, you need another guy in the locker room who balances that out with experience. It's one of the big reasons why we wanted to get Johnny Bornstein, frankly. And we tried to get him last January. But so Johnny's now in a position where he can directly mentor Andre, even in the position. We won't limit ourselves to younger players, but I think we still need to find more players in that sweet spot of 25 to 28, 29 years old. Those players also tend to be the most expensive. Those players also tend to be the hardest to find out of contract or you're paying large transfer fees for. But ultimately, it comes down to fit. Is it the right fit? And how does it relate to the other pieces of the roster puzzle?
Over here to Orange Schwartz.
Nelson, I've got a 2-part follow-up question regarding Pano. You mentioned that you have some things in mind for him to change. First of all, what are those things? And after 4 seasons, is he capable of change, and why hasn't he made those changes before?
First thing, it's not just Pano. It's the entire staff. It's not one individual, right? We went into this collectively, and we will remain collective. No, I won't share those things because I haven't shared it with him yet. Maybe at some point in the future I will, and I still have things to share with the staff individually as well as collectively. So I think it's proper to do that business that way, and I hope you can respect that. And I think people evolve and need to evolve. In our case, my opinion, I hope Pano will forgive me, but losing impacts you. Losing hurts. I'll speak for me more than making any comments on Pano, but a lot of people have trusted me. A lot of people have taken jobs here because of the vision that I've sold and the values that I've espoused and that I believe we must adhere. And letting them down doesn't feel good. Knowing that sales representatives won't hit bonuses because their numbers aren't good and that's a reflection of the team. Those things are real, they're human. And they have an impact. And you have to find your resources of resilience, you have to find your nourishment of faith, and you have to evolve and get better. And, I mentioned that one of the reasons why I want to bring someone in is I needed to help more, and I didn't. And I take that on. But I think with help, we can continue to evolve in a positive way. Another thing that's difficult, the blurred lines that I've referenced is, man, we play some good football. And in a lot of ways, that's hard to achieve. And I don't just say it. Other teams say it. Frank DeBoer has said it. Dome has said it. Jimmy Curtin has said it. Chris Armas has said it. It's our opponents say it. John Thorrington called me this week, kind of him, to check in and see how I was doing, but also to say, you know what, you guys easily could have beaten us. And we were the first team to take a point off LAFC at home this year. So I want to believe that we can get better, and we will get better. And it's my job to make that happen, and I have to do better. The other part of it is, and Pano knows this, if we don't change or we're unwilling to change, we can't advance, because we've seen that story.
Let's go to Jorge.
Pues se hablan de muchas cosas, pero a mí me sigue inquietando el tema de la grandeza del reto que tienen para hacer que este equipo funcione en Chicago, teniendo en cuenta que de allá vino acá y pues se puede deducir que no da resultado. Tú eres un hombre de muchos números, de estadísticas. Por este equipo han pasado muchas figuras de nombre mundial, desde Ruiz Stoichkov al principio casi del equipo. Ahora con Bastian Schweinsteiger. Por ahí estuvo Cuauhtémoc Blanco también, casi a la mitad, poco más. Pero esa etapa de Cuauhtémoc, ¿quién ha traído al estadio a 6,000 gentes a verlo el día que lo presentan? Cuando lo anuncian el día antes a las 8 de la noche. Al siguiente día que había 6,000, 7,000 personas solo para presentarlo. Se vendieron muchísimas playeras, la época que más se vendieron playeras, se veía el estadio lleno. Viene un tipo como, un gran jugador como Basti, campeón mundial, etcétera. Ese es el reto, lo que a mí me inquieta. ¿Qué van a hacer para llenar ahora ese hueco? Teniendo en cuenta también que con un entrenador, creo que es buen entrenador, Pano, que hizo mucho, trabaja muy bien la pelota parada, no lo acompañaron muchos resultados. ¿Cómo se va a llenar todo eso para hacer que florezca el equipo y compita el equipo en todos los aspectos como están haciendo otras franquicias? Digo, no es bueno comparar a nadie, pero vemos Atlanta, 70,000 personas en un estadio. Ese es el reto que de mi parte inquieta y con la afición latina. ¿Cómo se hace?
Jorge said he's uncomfortable, nervous about the immense challenge that we face, citing our history with great names like Stoichkov and Blanco, and all of Blanco's success and the jerseys that he sold and the fans that greeted him at the airport and the number of tickets he sold in 24 hours. He recognized that his words, that Pano's a good coach and he's done some good things, but the results didn't seem to accompany him, and hard to compare. But you look at Atlanta and how is it going to be? How are we going to get there? No es una cosa, Jorge, y también no es una cosa que se puede hacer así. Es un proceso que te va a frustrar a ti o a otra gente. Pero al principio hablo de jugadores. En mi opinión, hay muy pocos jugadores que uno puede conseguir hoy en día que pueden tener el impacto como tuvo Blanco. Atlanta, el impacto no vino por los jugadores, sino por todo el proceso que ellos hicieron, teniendo casi 2 años de preparación. En Seattle igual. Y para mí el proceso, el primer paso es cómo nos compartimos con la gente y cómo hablamos con la gente y cómo ponemos la cara con la gente. Y obviamente tenés que ganar con eso también. Y esta ciudad y este público ha demostrado cuando el producto es bueno, cuando el equipo gana, van a aportar. Y esta ciudad ha mostrado, si te aman, como lo amaban a los Cubs por más de 100 años, sin ganar, todavía te iban a aportar. Y yo pienso que para nosotros tenemos que mostrar, y como intentamos de hacer con el regalo a los 68 aficionados que están con nosotros por todos los años, que escuchamos a la gente, que tomamos en cuenta sus opiniones y que vamos a intentar de hacer cosas adecuadas en la forma correcta. Sobre los jugadores, mira, tú me deberías decir a mí quién serían los jugadores que uno puede traer que va a cambiar. Mínimamente yo sé 3, Messi, Ronaldo y Neymar, y pienso que no van a fichar en este momento para ni nuestro club ni para salir de Europa. El tiempo de ellos todavía no está, y cuando llegue el tiempo vamos a ver si todavía tienen fútbol en sus piernas. Es un proceso, se tiene que trabajar del más fundamental y se tiene que tomar en cuenta todos los detalles en ese proceso. Said I don't have a sexy answer. It's a process, which no one wants to hear that word. But it's about relating to people on their terms. It's about proving that we listen and take into account the feedback and the desires and the wishes of our fans. Of course, you have to win, although this fan base has demonstrated that it will come when we win, and Chicago fan base in general has said if they love you, just as they loved the Cubs for over 100 years before they won, that they'll continue to come. So we have to work on the details. The gesture of just to the 68 fans, the season tickets is just a sign of we're trying to show a new face of the club, trying to show greater appreciation and trying to behave in the right ways all the time. But it starts with fundamentals and goes from there. And the last thing I said is, who are the players you could sign and would flip attendance? I said probably the 3 most obvious are Messi, Ronaldo, and Neymar, but I don't think they're looking to sign with us or our league. And when they are ready, I don't know how much football they'll have left in their legs, so we'll see. And I welcome any suggestions. ¿Tenés alguno? Okay.
Just
Chris
like-
Hartwick?
This is like a fantasy draft. We talked about the snake. Both times he's asked basically exactly what I wanted to ask. So
Come on.
I'm not adapting well, but to be a little bit more, if we can get a little bit more specific, you've talked about, you have to do better. It's on me, one of the things that you said. Looking at team business operations and fan engagement that we focus on, and we've talked about that some. Does adding this chief culture officer and this new technical position, what does that free you up more time? Is that more time for meeting with fan groups, season ticket holders, selling season ticket holders and sponsors, or something else on the business side? What do you see
Yeah.
being able to maximize?
So when we provided a strategic direction to ownership in March, and we went into some fairly significant detail, there were three main strategic pillars, and we intend to roll all of that out as part of the brand refresh, because that was a part of it as well. We've spoken about one, which is this concept of being Chicago. And the biggest tactic to that was returning to the city, which we've been able to do through Andrew and Joe together, and moving forward now with Joe. A second one, which I hadn't planned to share, but I'll share with you now, Chris, is this concept of being a club. And that is something that we can own. The Bears can't, the Cubs can't, the White Sox can't, the Bulls can't, the Blackhawks can't. And we can be a club, and be a club in the sense of how it is around the world, and also just in the sense of broader clubs that you like belonging to, whether it's the Soho House or Million Miles with frequent flyers with a certain group. So those areas have a lot to them. Being Chicago isn't just playing our games there or moving our offices there. It's being present in the lives of our fans and in ways that they appreciate. I have this theory that we've moved into an area of indephiliation, where the individual wants to retain his or her desires and identity, yet wants to belong to something, wants to affiliate with a tribe. And you look at that, and you look at the differences between how and what our supporters want versus how a family wants to be treated and spoken to, and offerings. And ironically, in Soldier Field, because of its size and its conveniences that we didn't have here, that gives us more opportunity to do some of those things. Part of being a club is having rituals. And this club may have had some traditions. I don't sense them and feel them now. But whether it's Atlanta and they create the Golden Spike, or it's Portland, which had Timber Joey or Timber Jimmy or Timber Johnny, and they have their things, or how they sing the anthem. And it's best if those things are natural and they happen on their own. But we may need to seed them, or we need to solicit from you or from fans or from supporters what they want to see. We always have to keep in mind the lens of fan safety and things like that. But I think this gives us a new opportunity to do those types of things. I'll leave the rest of the story, if you don't mind, to the brand reveal.
You got you on a roll. I thought you get all three.
Okay. I hope that helped a little bit. Good.
So Brian Sandalo on the conference line. Brian, do you have a question for Nelson?
Yeah, hi. When you guys signed the ESPN Plus deal, I believe right before the 2018 season, the media landscape was different in the city than it is now, and the franchise is different than it is now. So are you guys working to change that deal for the 2020 season, get some games on more traditional broadcast, and if you will be exclusively on ESPN Plus locally, how does that fit in with trying to get more exposure to fans and trying to fill a stadium that will have at least 28,000 capacity?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. First, when we did that deal, the landscape was different. We did see trend lines of cord cutters and the convenience of accessibility wherever you were. Also, I must say that part of it was just showing self-respect. Our previous deal just wasn't delivering on promotion and helping expand the growth or the relevance of the club. I think what has happened subsequently is suitors have started to express their interest. We knew then that there were murmurs that the Cubs would look to start their own network. They have with Marquee. And Joe's in agreement and has said so publicly that, accessibility, sampling of our product becomes really important. And so we'll look at that. We'll look to see if there's an accommodation to be had in the ESPN deal. Generally, you're negotiating a year out anyway, so that it fits into our timeline, whether we modify our existing deal or just strike a new deal for 2021. Whether that's exclusively with ESPN or someone else, I think time will tell. But in general, what we're looking for is a partner who is vested in helping us grow the sport, and obviously grow our brand.
Let's go to Jose Luis. Jose Luis, do you have a question for Nelson?
Sí, Nelson, le quería preguntar, y no sé, me imagino que será una cosa que ya haya incluso hablado con Paunovic, y es la siguiente cuestión. ¿Se va a buscar cerrar la plantilla antes de que empiece la temporada? Por lo menos en la mayor medida posible, ¿no? Hemos visto en los últimos años, como empieza la temporada, empiezan a llegar jugadores, saliendo y entrando jugadores durante casi toda la temporada, con todos los pros y los contras que eso lleva, ¿no?
Sí.
Es como si no se hicieran bien los deberes en la pretemporada, ¿no? ¿Se va a buscar cerrar y empezar ya con un bloque y poder tirar para adelante con ese grupo?
So the question is, will we try to close all or most of our major incorporations prior to the start of preseason? Sí, mira, el mejor año que tuvimos en 2017, menos de Basti, pero él vino en el primer mes, tuvimos la oportunidad de cerrar las incorporaciones más importantes, Juninho, Dax, Nikolic en ese año y otros. Eso obviamente es algo que queremos hacer y vamos a intentar de cumplir. Pienso que el fichaje de Medrán muestra que estamos trabajando en eso. Tomamos 3 opciones hoy de 3 jugadores que de vuelta muestra que estamos intentando de tener el plantel, pero de vuelta en ciertos casos tenés que esperar hasta que el jugador tiene 6 meses hasta el fin de su contrato antes que poder hablar con ese jugador si él sale de contrato. Eso quiere decir que en ciertos casos no podemos hablar con el jugador hasta enero y tenemos que esperar, y ahí dependen las negociaciones. Pero cuándo y cómo podemos, queremos tener el plantel cerrado antes de la pretemporada. Yes, in general, we'd like to have the majority of our team in place prior to the start of preseason. I think we were successful with that in 2017, with really just Basti joining us after the season started. But Dax, Nemanja, and Juninho, who were 3 big acquisitions that offseason, were all occurred prior to preseason. I think the signing of Medrán shows that we are trying to move in that direction. Exercising 3 options today shows we're trying to move in that direction, but it's always a case-by-case situation. Some players, you have to wait until they're 6 months to the end of their contract, which for most European players means you can't speak to them until January, at which point that's when your negotiations can begin, and so unless you want to pay a transfer fee. So we'll deal with it on a case-by-case basis, but we're hoping to have the majority of the team locked up prior to preseason.
All right, that concludes today's roundtable. Thank you all for attending. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you, Nelson, for your time.
Great, thank you.